Welcome to Legally Speaking, a monthly series of informative legal programs to help WWRL listeners in need of various services. I'm joined in the studio by Mr. Robert Fallarino of Pegalis and Erickson. Robert is an associate of the firm for over 20 years, handling complex labor law, product defects, and medical malpractice litigation. Mr. Fallarino represented most of the major metropolitan area hospitals when he began his career at one of Long Island's largest medical malpractice defense firms. Mr. Fallarino is admitted to practice in New York, North Carolina, and Washington, D.C., so all of those listening on WWRL1600.com and hearing us on TuneIn, make sure you pay attention. In addition, he is admitted to practice in the federal courts of Eastern and Southern Districts of New York and the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. Bob is a member of the New York State Bar Association, New York State Trial Lawyers Association, Nassau County Bar Association, Washington, D.C. Bar Association, and American Association for Justice. Bob obtained his law degree from St. John's University School of Law and obtained his undergraduate degree also from St. John's, magna cum laude. Very impressive. And was a St. Thomas More scholar. Doesn't it always sound more impressive when someone else is reading what you've accomplished?
Actually, it's a little embarrassing. I should cut that down.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. I mean, that those are some credentials. And when you are going into court, you want the best. You want to know that the person who has my back and has my best interest is the best, is magna cum laude.
Well, I agree with that. You want to make sure that when you're being represented, that it's someone that has the power behind them to back it up.
Right. Not only the power, the knowledge, and coming from a top firm like Pegalis and Erickson, which was rated in the top 5 by U.S. News and World Report.
It was actually the best on Long Island.
Best on Long Island?
Yep. And we're based out of Lake Success, but we, as you know, we're nationwide as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, covering. We were just talking before when we were in the green room just chatting. You've handled cases as far west as Idaho.
That's correct.
So,
and Nebraska.
So all over the place.
Exactly.
Big Sky and Midwest everywhere.
And success. What's important is the successful resolution for the patient that was harmed in those situations.
Right. Yeah, getting some resolution. Now, what kind of cases does the law firm of Pegalis and Erickson take on?
Well, we take on, in terms of medical malpractice cases, which is what we're here today about, is from a brain damage or brain injured infant, a neurologically impaired adult, whether it's a spinal injury or a brain injury, like a stroke, or someone who had a traumatic injury to the spinal cord. It's things where it is a catastrophic injury. People don't always think about injury when it's like a cancer victim. But there's also injury in those situations when there's a delay in diagnosis or a misdiagnosis that causes the situation to change over time, whereas it was curable a year before, it becomes incurable or much more devastating afterwards.
The longer you wait. Right.
Absolutely.
Time is of the essence when it comes to cancer or any of these illnesses. It really is you need an immediate solution.
Right.
Or at least immediate attention.
And even in the brain injury or the spinal injury, you need immediate attention in the sense of making it lesser impact on the patient.
Right, because the longer they wait, the worse the after effects will be.
Yeah, exactly. That's the right word.
Now, recently I read about a Pegalis and Erickson won a case for a young mother who is now suffering from terminal cancer because the doctors did not do the right testing.
Yeah, that was a case venued out in Suffolk County that I handled, and it was a number 4 verdict in the whole state with medical malpractice and in the top 10 overall. But it was that's a patient safety issue.
Right.
And that poor patient, she went in, she complained of a lump. They did a mammography, but she was young. She was in her 40s, so mammography is not as sensitive. They should have gone on and done the sonogram right away. It would have been detected over a year and a half earlier, and it would have changed her outcome dramatically, as that jury said.
Right. And we want to take our health grab hold of our own health.
Well, that's one of the things that, hopefully through these kind of cases, the message gets out about patient safety. And the word gets out, like that case in particular, by publicizing what happened to her. Other women in the same situation will say, hey, I want a sonogram as well. I need that extra test so that my life isn't impacted. And that family had 3 children under 10.
Oh, wow.
So the impact on not only her, but the whole life.
The family. These are not cases where it's just simply the patient, because there's always a ripple effect. There's the children. There's a spouse. There were parents in some cases. So this is when we talk about a lawsuit, a successful lawsuit on behalf of this patient, this poor woman who's suffering. It's not just about let's take the family vacation to the Bahamas to ease. This is real. These are medical issues, and this is what the family's going to have to be dealing with.
And you gave a great example with regard to a cancer patient, but just think of it of a brain-damaged infant that should not have been.
Right. The
entire family impact in terms of what their future would be and is all impacted, not only the children that are already there, but the children that might have been. And in addition, it's also the impact in terms of the cost of survival now, where, hopefully we can make it as easy as possible and put him in as best a position as possible through,
Because if you take into consideration the after effects, if you're representing a client who was injured and now has to make, say, home improvements or adjustments, a ramp or a new stair, a stair lift or something like that, that costs a lot of money.
And it costs money over time.
Yes, years and years and years of care.
They think of it in terms of every sink, shower, just the minor things have to be adjusted, but a ramp into the home, and think of it in terms of transportation, a van that is wheelchair accessible and has to grow over time with the infant. And change over time. A van only lasts so long.
Now, what are some examples of medical malpractices that people would not necessarily think of, but maybe they should be thinking of?
Okay. Well, I think we gave a great example with the case that we just won the verdict on, is that if you think there's been some delay, a significant delay, not a month or two, but sometimes a month or two is significant. But in terms of, I made a complaint, I was making this complaint over time, and it was not being ignored, but it wasn't being followed up on, and you sort of fell through the cracks. That's an example of, then a year later, your cough is lung cancer. Okay.
Yeah, it's gone from it's a stage 4 or what.
Exactly, and that's an important thing. There's almost every cancer has a curable stage. Even the ones that you hear that are terrible, that has a curable time frame. And if there's a delay in getting to it, that's where this, when you talk about a medical malpractice case, that's where it impacts you, is when you've changed your situation from being in that curable group to now being life-altering.
Now, we had your partner, Robert Erickson, on a little while ago, and he was very clear that this is not an anti-doctor. This is a pro-client. This is a pro-patient.
It's really pro-patient. Pegalis and Erickson, we actually have a whole lecture series being sponsored at the New York Law School every year about patient safety. That this is, lawyers should be advocating for the public. And this is what we do. And if you look at it in terms of, over time, not only does technology change in terms of making patients more safe, but these kind of lawsuits have changed the way in which doctors think to be hopefully more proactive, and hopefully in the future they'll even be more proactive.
You literally set a new precedent as we go along to keep everybody on the same page.
And hopefully the mindset is for the benefit of the patient. Okay, as opposed to, it's not about protecting the doctors or the hospitals. It's about protecting the patient.
Medical, everything is very daunting. People don't like to go to the dentist for a cleaning. People don't like to go for a regular routine checkup. And when you have something more serious, where you're going into more specialists and you're going in for tests and you're going in for this or that, or maybe you're not. Maybe you should be getting these tests, and you need an advocate to stand up on your behalf. Pegalis and Erickson has these clients' backs.
Right? Exactly. And I think what you just pointed out is a very key thing that sometimes is when a patient goes in who doesn't typically go in for treatment, that should be a red flag that person thinks something's really wrong with me. And it's not just a cold or a cough. And especially if someone was a smoker in the past and now has a cough and is now for the first time coming into the doctor after 4 or 5 years, that doctor should say, wow, the person sitting in front of me is really concerned. Let me be proactive.
There's something going on here. This is not just somebody who's being a hypochondriac or this is their ailment of the day. This is a real ailment.
Another example of that would be a parent who brings a young child, an 8 to 12-year-old, into the emergency room at 2 or 3 in the morning.
Okay.
Who's not someone who they typically see. So that would be a red flag, or should be a red flag to the emergency room doctor, that mom and dad think something's wrong here, and be a little bit more proactive and not just say it's okay, go home.
Not being dismissed as a nervous parent.
Exactly.
But what about also on the flip side? What about a parent taking or an adult taking their grown parent in? Maybe the parent had good health all along, and now we're all living longer, and our parents are living longer. And the same could be said, we're now taking care of our parents. And maybe a parent could face the same dilemma.
Well, and actually, I think as we age, you'll see the geriatric population and the elderly population needing more and more health care, as we're seeing already. And they're living incredibly longer. And the hope is that they will receive the same patient care, whether you're 60, 70, or 80, as when you're 20, 30, and 40. Because not only are they entitled to it, but they have lots of great wisdom and experience to be passed down to their children and their grandchildren that we shouldn't be losing just because they're being dismissed as already lived their life.
Right. Or they're getting old, and this is part of getting old.
For example, if you owe someone who accompanies your parent to the doctor, and so that you make sure that everything's communicated, you have to look out for a doctor that is not being dismissive, but sort of looking at you like, well, you've already met your life goal.
Right.
Because you're there not just to get to 81. You're there to live
as long as you live.
As long as you're supposed to live.
Right. And live as healthy and well as you're supposed to.
And that's the reason, as an elder person, that you're going to the doctor is not so that you have illnesses; it's to prevent the illnesses from coming.
Now, you mentioned about at the New York School of Law. Now, we're following you on Twitter. We can keep up with these updates and keep up at Pegalis Erickson on Twitter. Find out more on PegalisandErickson.com. And I've already liked the Facebook page. I get my updates, Facebook /Pegalis and Erickson. Now, we've been talking about money and talking about settlements for clients. Now, what is the most money someone has been awarded for being the victim of medical malpractice?
Well, every year there's, as we alluded to in the beginning, every year there's a top verdicts and settlement published by the New York Law Journal, and you'll see some of them range in the hundreds of millions, and that has to do with lifelong care issues and things of that nature. So it's very every jurisdiction has their own limits and their own caps on things. So there's no real, if we wanted to say, for example, our firm had two verdicts in the $115, $114, $117 million range. So those are at that time were the highest in the state for those particular years, or one of the highest. So and they were for patients that had lifelong needs afterwards in terms of skilled care and monitoring and facility care. So those are where you get the hundreds of millions of dollars verdicts. And obviously, no one really wants those kinds of verdicts.
No, of course not. Of course not. Right now, we're still, the Boston Marathon bombings are still very much on people's minds, and there's been a lot of outpouring of support and money for the victims. But, prosthetics and aftercare and rehabilitation and physical therapy, all of that costs a lot of money.
It costs a lot of money over time, and not just in the short run. Those are people, and that's where America is great. America really comes out.
We're very generous.
Yes.
We're very, very generous.
And that's an example of dozens of people that, for no fault of their own, just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Absolutely.
Need continuing, ongoing, extensive care and treatment to get them back to their plateau. And that's an example of a non-legal setting, a non-medical malpractice setting, if you will, that shows where people understand there's healthcare needs after the fact. And that's why, in our particular area and other areas like product defects, if a product has a defective component to it, where people are injured, that these, that's why the doors to the courthouse have to remain open, because there's people who, through no fault of their own, have catastrophic, life-changing situations where the people who put that product on the market, or in what we're talking about, where a physician or hospital causes an injury, they're the people who should be paying and helping.
There's a certain amount of trust that we instill into a medical professional that you know better than I do. So I'm putting my health and my well-being and my life in your hands. And if that person is not taking you seriously or not taking your child or your parents seriously, their concerns, then that's a cause for real alarm.
Well, absolutely, and that's why you heard the phrase second opinion.
Yes.
There's not only a second opinion, but when you're feeling that there's something very serious going on, that you need to be proactive in your health care. That's one of the things about patient safety that maybe we can give to people so that they never have to come see someone like me, is if you're thinking you're not getting where you want to get, ask the next question.
Right.
Don't stop. If there's a test that you think should be done, ask why not. The generation before you and I, if the doctor said something, that was it.
That was it. That was the doctor's word was the law. That was the last stop.
Exactly. But now that we're getting more educated, we have the internet. Do your internet research, and then even when you're there, if you're not satisfied with what's happening, ask the why question.
Ask the why. Yes, there's a lot of questions to be asked, and do your research on PegalisandErickson.com. Find out more on Facebook at Pegalis and Erickson, and follow Pegalis Erickson at Pegalis Erickson on Twitter. You're in tune to Legally Speaking. This is your host, John Campanerio. I am joined by Mr. Robert Fallarino of Pegalis Erickson LLC. Now, we were talking again. We're talking about the per capita number of attorneys and where we were guessing might be the highest. Now, we hear there are more lawyers in New York City than there are cars. Okay, what would you say to a young person who might want to become an attorney?
Well, I want to just say I doubt that, seeing how many taxi cabs there are around Penn Station at rush hour. But beyond that, law is good whether you use it or not.
Okay.
In any profession you want to go in, it's a basic teaching tool on how to ask the questions of why, what's going on, why is it going on, and keep probing till you get your answer. So whether you're going to go into business or any kind of relationship where you have to get to the whys of why things are going on, it's a good legal reasoning is really a checklist of reasoning going down the line. But it's also, with the emerging technology fields and everything that's going on, there's new frontiers in law that are opening up all the time that are building on patent and trademark and copyright. But it's going to be a whole new exciting area to go into. It's something that this generation who are 20-year-old have grown up with technology, so they know what's the next thing to come around the bend. It
is a new frontier.
Yes.
It is a very new frontier. We've come a long way from cordless landline phones and the remote control for the TV. Now you're walking around with the internet in your pocket.
Right. And even what we do, even the old style law of what we've been doing for generations is something where I think you alluded to very early on, is that we're the mouthpiece for people who can't speak for themselves.
Right.
And you can help people who would have no other means of being helped. And when I'm on trial and I turn around and I see that family sitting there, I know I'm standing between them and nothing.
And nothing, absolutely. Or worse than nothing. These injuries or, like you said, these catastrophes can absolutely ruin families.
It ruins families, and it ruins extended families, and it ruins help and the hope for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. You're in tune to Legally Speaking with Pegalis and Erickson. This is your host, John Campanerio, and I am joined by Mr. Robert Fallarino, associate for over 20 years. And you're a local guy, too. You St. John's?
I haven't strayed far.
No, not too far, but that's okay. You don't have to go too far.
Other than when I'm in Idaho and Nebraska.
Other than that, when you're wandering out to Big Sky territory.
Exactly.
But, and the Red Storm's really coming back.
Well, absolutely. Steve Lavin is our hope.
Yes, he is. He's the standing between the St. John's alum, between the NCAA tournament and better luck next year.
Absolutely.
Right?
So we're all behind, as they say, Lavinwood at the St. John's campus.
All right, and we've got a new conference coming and everything, so it'll be interesting to see how things shake out.
That's exactly right.
Now, Mr. Fallarino, a lot of people hold their doctors in very high regard and cannot imagine even being a medical professional. I mean, that in itself is quite an achievement to become an MD. So when someone is told something went wrong at the hospital with their surgery, do they think it's bad luck? I mean, what do most people think?
Well, I think in terms of what people initially think about is that concept. Is it bad luck, or is it something that I'm concerned with, have to be concerned with?
Yeah.
So what we need, when they come to us, that's the question, or that's the answer that we can answer for them.
Yeah.
And that's a function that is wonderful for us to be able to do. It's actually it's one of my better days when I can tell someone that there isn't a case, that this is something that their life course for their loved one was going to happen, that it's no one's fault.
Right.
I call myself a God forbid lawyer.
Okay.
I'm someone that, God forbid you need us, we're here to answer your questions and hopefully try to win the day for you.
Now, if I'm looking you up on PegalisandErickson.com, or if I'm reaching out to the office at 516-684-2900, what is it going to cost me? What does it cost someone to to come to you?
Okay. We also have a toll-free number.
Give me the toll-free number, please.
There.
Okay, it's 888-706-2113, 888-706-2113. So you're even picking up the cost of the phone call.
Even the phone call. The initial consultation is totally free. You don't have to worry about that. We even, if need be, like if it's a brain-damaged individual or is physically impaired, we have a van that will come and pick you up. So that's, really something that's very important for people to know that, we'll go the extra mile and make sure that you're handled in the right way and that everything's okay for you. So it's really no cost. And I think one of the things that is wonderful about what we do is we work on a contingent fee.
Okay, what does that mean?
So that means that you only have to pay us a fee if we're ultimately successful.
Okay.
So what that means is we walk with you down that road, and we're only successful if we are successful on your behalf. So that means, number one, that we do our homework, and we, as you said, doctors should not be sued if it's wrongly.
Right.
So we will not pursue a case that is not meritorious, because that's what we do. And then secondly, we don't charge a fee unless we are actually, at the end of the day, successful.
And Pegalis and Erickson has been one of the most successful, certainly in New York State, but actually in the entire country.
And, so in terms of the successes that we have had, obviously that speaks volumes for not only the cases that we take on, but also the ability of the trial lawyers and all the litigators that we have. We have litigators that are specialized at all stages along the way. So wherever you are in the litigation, you'll have someone who is really an expert in handling those types of cases, that part of the case.
That part, right. And that's one of the benefits of Pegalis and Erickson with all of the experience. And you've got an entire team at your disposal. An entire team of people working for you. It's not just you, Bob. It's an entire team on your behalf.
Absolutely, we have, and that's one of the benefits is that we have a nurse consultant at the very beginning. Before we started.
So you have someone even in-house, somebody who is from the has a medical background.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then what we do is even before we say whether we're going to accept a case or not accept a case, is we send it out to experts to review. So before we even get going, before we say, okay, it's time to file a summons complaint, we have our roadmap of what really happened. So in terms of the process is laid out in a way to make sure that all the hurdles you have to pass as a patient and in a courtroom that we haven't set up at the beginning before we get going.
We, especially here in New York, we're very do-it-yourself. We like to take control of our own destiny. And maybe you want to do your own taxes, maybe you want to plant your own garden, but this handling your own legal case is certainly something you do not want to do.
Well, and even if you're a lawyer, there's an old phrase: if you have yourself as a client, you have a fool for a client.
Fool for a client? Yeah, okay. I would imagine that.
So even if you're a lawyer, you shouldn't be handling your own case. But in terms of medical, not only do you want a lawyer to handle your medical malpractice matter, if you think there's a medical error, you want someone who specializes in the field.
This is a niche. This is you've had a lot of experience doing this. You've benefited a lot of clients and helped ease. I mean, you can't really undo a malady, but you can ease somebody down the road and help them cope with the after effects.
And what you can do is make their life get to the place as best you can.
As best you could, right. If they were living at a level of a 9 or a 10, you can at least get them back close to that, where they can wave and say, "I'm close to back to where I was."
And they have all the medical needs necessary to keep going, so that they can live as long as they can, and they can do as best they can with where they should have been. So you definitely want someone who knows that area of the law, and also that your adversaries, the defense lawyers, the lawyers that are representing the doctors in the hospital, know that they're up against someone or a firm that knows what they're doing. That's what Pegalis and Erickson hopefully brings to the table, is the respect of our adversaries.
Well, just like we'd love to see St. John's back into a Final Four or at least an Elite Eight, you've got in Pegalis and Erickson, you have a Final Four or it's certainly a national champion at your disposal.
We have a good team.
We have a great team.
Hopefully a national championship level
Hopefully
team.
A national championship level. And give them a call at 888-706-2113, 888-706-2113. Again, you're even picking up the cost of the phone call. So there's no reason to not reach out to Pegalis and Erickson.
And the worst that'll happen is we'll say,
either yes or no.
Exactly. exactly. But at least your questions, when you have questions after everything's said and done and the doctors aren't answering those questions and they're not answering them to your satisfaction, give us a call and we'll hopefully fill in the gaps.
Right. You want somebody who, and again, you have medical professionals within the office, so somebody could review and this is not somebody sitting at home. You wouldn't perform surgery on yourself. So you wouldn't, this is not just, skimming WebMD and giving yourself a diagnosis. You really need a team of professionals that Pegalis and Erickson is bringing to the table.
Well, absolutely. And you also want to be able to get someone who can read the records and read what's in between the lines.
That's another thing. You would have access, or at least you would have the tenacity and the wherewithal to obtain the appropriate medical records. If somebody's just calling a hospital asking certain questions of doctors or whatnot, how far are they going to get on their own?
And even if they get the record, will they be able to interpret it in a way?
Understand it.
And know what, maybe this isn't the only record I need to get. What's the other record? So our job is to not turn over the first stone, but to turn over every stone.
And that's what, when we were, you alluded to earlier about having that law degree, knowing what questions to ask, knowing that first or second question is going to lead to fourth, fifth, 10th question, that you know how and to navigate this, and you know what to ask to get to the root of the problem or to get the answer you need.
Absolutely, and we know the way to ask a question to make sure the witness gives us the answer that we want to get.
Right.
Because we want to get to the truth, not just what the other side wants to tell us.
Right. I think that's well said, and we will end on that. This has been Legally Speaking. Your host, John Campanerio. I've been joined in the studio by Mr. Robert Fallarino of Pegalis and Erickson, a 20-year experience handling medical malpractice, labor law, product defects. So give Pegalis and Erickson a call, toll free. 888-706-2113, 888-706-2113. Make sure you're following on Twitter at Pegalis Erickson, the website PegalisandErickson.com, and of course everybody's on Facebook, and find them on Facebook at Pegalis and Erickson. Bob, thank you so much for joining us on Legally Speaking.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, we're going to be rooting again. The basketball season will be here before we know it. I mean, we're getting through the NBA playoffs now, but the NCAA will be here before we know it. So go Red Storm.
Red Storm.
All right. Thank you very much.